Now, there are records that I want, and there are records that I really, really want. But every time I take a look for these records that I've wanted for years, every time I see the price and then I say, yeah, no, I'm not getting that. I'm not paying that. I'm not paying over $1,000 for that. Well, welcome back to the AV room. I love vinyl. I love the artwork. I love the physical experience. I love putting a record on and actually sitting down and listening to that record. And I know many of you do. But there's a point where loving vinyl and being a vinyl collector becomes financially stupid. Because some albums have reached the point where I'm not paying for the music anymore. I'm paying for the scarcity. And that's where I finally made a decision. What I'm going to do is, if I can buy the CD for a fraction of what the vinyl costs, then I'm going to buy the CD. I'm not going to buy the vinyl because it isn't worthy of being vinyl, or it's not a good pressing, or it's a great pressing. I'm not buying the vinyl because it's just my wallet getting murdered. How about that? So today, these are 10 albums that I've wanted to add to my collection for years, and I'm finally going to look at getting them. Number 1, let's start at a title I've wanted for a hot minute. This is an obvious example title. Them Crooked Vultures. You've got Josh Homme, you've got Dave Grohl, you've got John Paul Jones. I mean, come on, it's a super group. You basically took 3 musicians from 3 enormous bands and put them in a room and said, what if we made something incredibly loud? Guess what? They did. The album came out in 2009, and it's still the band's only studio album. There's been no follow-up. But this is where things start to get stupid. The original 2 LP pressing has become a collector's item. Current pricing guides show original pressings reaching well into the hundreds of dollars, while CDs can be found for dramatically less money. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Do I want this on vinyl? You bet, absolutely. Am I willing to pay several $100s to get this on vinyl? Absolutely effing not. So, I'm going to get the CD. That's number 1, Them Crooked Vultures. It's 2009, it's loud, it's dense, it's basically 3 guys showing off how great they are at rock. I just don't need to spend $300 to hear it. Okay, now we're going to go somewhere completely different. Number 2, the KLF, Chill Out. Have you ever heard of KLF? Have you ever heard of Chill Out? But this album is one of those records that's almost impossible to explain to anybody who hasn't heard it. It's definitely ambient, yet it's electronic. It's psychedelic, it's samples. It's a road trip through the American South that never actually happened. When the KLF originally released Chill Out in 1990, I was 20 years old. And there were official UK and CD releases of Chill Out at the same time. And the original vinyl? Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those records that quickly reminded us that the old electronic album and cheap vinyl are not necessarily the same thing. There are copies and reissues floating around for sure. You can find them if you know where to look. They're not easy to find, but you can find them. The collectible original editions can get very expensive. And honestly, I want the music. I want to put the KLF Chill Out album on late at night after I get home from tattooing. It's a weird little Texas to Louisiana hallucination thing, but I don't need a museum quality copy. It was very analog to begin with and recorded on tapes. So, CD for KLF Chill Out 100%. It's a much more affordable alternative to the albums that cost hundreds of dollars, if you can find one. Number 3, Dennis Wilson, Pacific Ocean Blue, an album I've loved for a very long time. This one might be one of the most important albums on this entire list in terms of being an important album. Dennis Wilson, Pacific Ocean Blue. Dennis was, of course, a member of the Beach Boys, but this album sounds nothing like you might expect a typical Beach Boys album to sound like. It's also a solo album. It's beautiful, it's melancholy, it's atmospheric. It's an incredibly personal album. The album originally came out in 1977, making me 7 years old. History is actually part of what makes the physical record so collectible. The 1991 CD release went out of print within a year because of copyright disputes, and the album itself is extremely difficult to find for years. Rare copies of the CD have reportedly sold for more than $200 before the 2008 reissue of the Dennis Wilson solo album. That's insane. And there have been later CD editions, including Japanese editions with bamboo material, which makes the CD route particularly attractive for collectors. This is one where I think getting the CD makes more sense than chasing the original vinyl. I'm not trying to win a bidding war. I'm just trying to own Pacific Island Blue. So, it looks like CD it is. Number 4, Beck, Midnite, Vultures. I fucking love this album. It's got Sex Laws, it's got Mixed Business, it's got Deborah and Hollywood Freaks. This is Beck completely refusing to behave. It's funky, it's weird, it's ridiculous, it's funny, hey, it's even sexy. It sounds like Beck threw everything he had into a blender, and somehow he still made one of the most entertaining albums of the year. The problem? Well, yep, the vinyl. Midnite Vultures came out in 1999, right when vinyl was basically an afterthought compared to CDs. And that means there aren't mountains of original copies sitting around. For years, Beck fans have been asking for a proper vinyl release because the album had gone so long without one. So that's the problem with collecting Beck. You're not just buying the album. Midnite Vultures is a scarce piece of vinyl in an era when nobody was buying vinyl. Everybody thought vinyl was going to go the way of the dodo bird, and it kind of has until this comeback. So, definitely the CD in this case. There's many copies to be found floating around on secondary markets like eBay and Discogs. And honestly, getting the CD in this case, I'm totally good with. Because Midnite Vultures deserves to be listened way more than it deserves to be behind glass, plastic, or not getting played at all. And because I have a CD player in my car, these are all logical purposes for me. I listen to music every day on the way to work. So Beck Midnite Vultures on CD it is. Number 5. I've been looking for this one for a long time. It seems like since the album came out, I've been looking for this on vinyl. I had the CD for many, many, many years. I'm talking about the Four Horsemen. It's an album called Nobody Said It Was Easy. It was 1991. I was the perfect age, 21. Produced by Rick Rubin. This is one of those records that exists in a strange little space between hard rock, bluesy rock and roll, and the stuff that was just about to get swallowed up by grunge. This original album came out on Def American, the spin-off of Def Jam, and the band eventually disappeared altogether after a follow-up. But the album developed this sort of cult following that's never really gone away. When James Hetfield wears your t-shirt in one of the Metallica music videos, you're going to have eyes on you. And that this band didn't explode really blows me away to this day. There have been actually multiple reissues. The band's own current release page sells a CD edition with bonus tracks, including 3 tracks that weren't on the original album. Now, there was also a 2018 vinyl repressing with additional material. And here's the problem. I ordered one. I paid, I believe it was $50 or $60 to get a repressing of the second repressing of this album. And I never heard back from the band. Well, I got one email, I think I still have it to this day, saying, where's the record? And them saying, well, we'll see if we can find one, and then crickets. So, this is a perfect example of why you have to think about which version you're actually trying to own. Because if I'm going to spend collector money on something, I want to know what I'm getting. And for this one, I'm, again, because of the prices on the Four Horsemen vinyl or the Four Horsemen repressing, I'm definitely going with the CD. It's, again, rising in price, as many of these CDs on this list are. What used to be had for $4 or maybe even $1, you now may be looking at $10 to $20, in some cases even $50. Number 6, Van Halen 3. Yeah, you didn't know I was going to say that, did you? Oh boy, I tell you, Van Halen 3, what a controversial album. You've got, yep, Gary Cherone, straight off of Extreme. You've got the first Van Halen album without David Lee Roth and without Sammy Hagar. I know people have opinions on this album, and very strong opinions, but here's the thing. I actually really like weird records. I commonly like records nobody else likes, or a very cult following for records. My obsession with Andy Taylor, perfect example. But I don't need everything in my collection to be universally loved by everyone. Sometimes I want that oddball. And Van Halen 3 is definitely an oddball in the Van Halen catalog, to be sure. It came out in 1998. I was 28. And because it was a late 90s reissue, its physical history is very difficult from something like, say, Van Halen from 1978 or 1984. And if you're hunting for vinyl today, you're dealing with a much smaller collector market. More people want it, there's less copies to be had. So once again, I'm not going to spend ridiculous money simply because the format says LP. In fact, I don't think Van Halen 3 has ever been available on LP. It's only been a CD release up to this point, with the exception of a very elusive black market version of Van Halen 3, most likely from a CD copy anyway. So if you want to hear Without You, if you want to hear Once, if you want to hear Eddie Van Halen singing the lead vocal, then you're going to need a copy of Van Halen 3. And I want the weird chapter of Van Halen. I'm perfectly happy with owning that chapter on CD. And the CD is easily accessible, again, for under $20. In some cases, I saw it as low as $4. So, CD it is. How about number 7? The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. That's a self-debut. Now, this one is different because, yeah, I already own it. I already own it on CD. This is Damon Albarn. I bought this original CD the day it came out on its original release. You've got Paul Simonon from The Clash, you've got Simon Tong from The Verve, and Tony Allen. This album was produced by Danger Mouse. It came out in 2007 and it reached number 2 in the UK and was certified gold there shortly after its release. But not so much in the US. In fact, this one was hard to find. I remember buying the CD when it was brand new. So I'm not actually trying to acquire this album. I want the vinyl. But here's the problem. The vinyl is simply too expensive for me to justify. And this DVD is pretty good. In fact, if I didn't mention it, it comes with a DVD. So you've got the CD and then a DVD of the making of the album, videos, that sort of thing. So it's actually a really cool copy and I already own it. Now the vinyl, why don't you own this on vinyl? Well, this is where sometimes collectors get into trouble. Maybe you make trouble for yourself. We convince ourselves that because we already own something, we can't own it again in a different format. No, I already own this album. But I bought it when it came out, and the CD works, and it sounds fantastic. I'm good. And for the prices that this is going for on the secondary market, to simply have it in vinyl is out of this world. I've seen prices as high as $2,000, with the median somewhere between $400 and $1,000. It's hard to find even in secondary market, and I think it's mostly people in the UK that got this on vinyl that won't let it go. So, because I already own it, The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, the spin-off Clash Gorillaz Verve band, stays on CD in my collection. Unless it gets repressed. Now we're talking turkey. If they repress this thing, I'm all on board. In fact, that kind of goes for any of these. If they were to repress them and I could get them for under $70, I'd definitely be in. But these crazy prices, nope, CD it is. Now, number 8 is by a band we all know, Nirvana. But here's the thing, I'm not talking about Nevermind. I don't own Nevermind. I do want to own this. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about Bleach. Bleach, 1989. This was the album before Nevermind. It was before MTV burned Nirvana into one of the biggest bands on the planet. And this is Nirvana before the world knew what was coming. Bleach is one very important on its own, and it's definitely part of the story, including the Sub Pop story who put it out. Bleach is one of the most important albums that was released in June of 1989. It was later remastered and expanded for a 2009 20th anniversary edition. Now here's another reason I don't feel bad about buying the CD. Sub Pop has historically kept CD editions considerably more affordable than some collectible vinyl editions. But CD editions are also going up in price. If you were to find an original CD pressing of Bleach, or even on cassette for Bleach, you're going to be paying big numbers. People want those original pressings of Bleach, whether it be cassette or CD or vinyl. But I'm not looking to pay crazy money. And I'm totally happy with a later, less expensive CD version. So why am I going to chase a particular rare pressing? I don't need that rare white vinyl pressing, that first pressing. I don't need some ultra-specific collector variant, colored cassette tapes, for instance, that are going for big dollars. I just need Nirvana's first album, the first album that really put me on their radar. And the CD, well, that's going to get me there at a much more affordable price. Again, many times under $20. So the CD it is for me again. Now number 9, the Beatles' Let It Be Naked. This one is fascinating because it's not simply another version of Let It Be. It's basically an attempt to present the album closer to what the Beatles originally intended. Let It Be Naked was released in 2003. It was the Beatles' official site describing it as the stripped-down version of this album, without the added orchestration and overdubs that became part of the original Let It Be presentation. And that's why this album's interesting, and it's interesting to many of us. Because it's not just, here's another presentation of Let It Be, or what if we take the Beatles out of the Phil Spector treatment and let the performances breathe? And that's why it's interesting to me. It's not, let's just do Let It Be again with a different cover, maybe some outtakes, but it's what if the Beatles put this out without ever meeting Phil Spector? Let the performances do the talking. Let the performances breathe. And that's what makes Let It Be Naked so special. Now, again, it's an album that goes for a lot of money for a vinyl version. And the CD version, while climbing, is still more affordable than the vinyl. So when you've got CDs that you can get for maybe anywhere from, depending on where you find it, let's say $14 to $30 to even $40 or $50 perhaps for a Japanese import, it's still considerably less than Let It Be Naked on vinyl. It's an album I can actually listen to and not collect and leave on a shelf. So I'm going to lean towards this CD here as well. Now this next one, it's kind of funny the timing how this all worked out, because it's New Order, Waiting for the Sirens Call. And finally, I got the CD. I've been wanting this for a real hot minute, trying to find the vinyl. But I found out that the CD, specifically the Japanese CD, had 2 extra tracks. One being the Japanese cover version of Crafty, and the other being a reworked version, a mix, if you will, a bonus track, which is called the Phones Reality Remix. And if you're a Hooky fan like I am, Peter Hook, the bass player for New Order, if you're a Hooky fan, his bass is all that remix is. The very last track, the remix for Crafty, it's major, major Peter Hook bass. And this album always stood out to me because of the bass on it. If you follow New Order, once Peter Hook left New Order, there was significantly less bass in any of their stuff they put to wax or CD or streaming since Peter Hook left the band. And I love this album. It's fantastic, and I know it backwards and forwards just from streaming it. It came out in 2005, and it was their 8th studio album. It reached number 5 in the UK album charts. It has big hits. It has Crafty, it has Hey Joe, it has Jetstream, it has Waiting for the Sirens Call, my favorite New Order song. So it's a mixture of electronic music, dance, touches of electronic, the Bernard Sumner solo project, showing in this. But it's the real last album with Peter Hook playing bass for a concept album in its entirety. Now, this was followed up by an odds and ends follow-up to No, and I want to get that as well. I just don't have it yet. Waiting for the Sirens Call, and you can see this even has the obi in it. But it's not about the obi, and it's not about the Japanese pressing. It's about, can I afford the vinyl? And if I can't, do I just want to listen to the music? Do I want to own the music? Well, in this case, decision made. I now own Waiting for the Sirens Call, and I'm not willing to pay those extravagant LP prices for secondhand markets. And I'm really hoping that with their current repress push, that they will eventually get to Waiting for the Sirens Call. And those of us that want it on vinyl can own it. But in the meantime, for under $20, I got Waiting for the Sirens Call, the Japanese CD import. And I got this as part of my JP fans order. So that's my top 10. And basically, it's 10 albums that I've wanted. And it's a reminder that collecting music is about not the most expensive music. They're not expensive, or maybe not the most expensive version of the music. But it's just because I love music. And yeah, I love vinyl. I'm going to keep buying vinyl. I'm not going to stop buying records. I'm going to keep hunting for even these records. And I'm going to get excited when I hear things that I want to get. But I'm also giving myself now permission to say, that's too expensive. That's way too expensive. I'm giving myself permission to buy the CD. So, what do you think? Were any of these on your list? Or do you have similar titles that you think, well, I want that, but I just don't want to pay that much for it? Well, maybe opt for the CD. That's an option over streaming. At least you can own the music. So, as always, I'm trying to hit 2,000 subscribers, so please join up, like and subscribe if you're not already a member. Leave a comment. Let me know what your expensive albums on your wants list are. I mean, we all have Robert Ludwig's mix of Led Zeppelin 2 on our list, but these are albums that should be affordable albums, but have fallen into that cult area of just getting too expensive. So I'm going with the CDs. So anyway, thank you for viewing this episode, and I will see you all soon here in the audio video room.